If you're a Sonic fan, you may have noticed that since about 2020, Sonic has been doing pretty well, at least when compared to the previous decade.
Look, ramps!
We can use these as ramps!
Sonic Frontiers was a big win for us back in 2022. Sure, the game was unpolished in a couple of places and was definitely rushed over the finish line to make its release date, but there's no denying that the new open zone format created in Frontiers was for sure the best way for Sonic to move forward. Frontiers finally gave us a blueprint for Sonic, and this time, Sega planned to stick to it. Speaking in an interview with Sector, series director Takashi Iizuka said, "Just like Sonic Adventure, our goal for Frontiers was to create a game that would be the cornerstone of future Sonic games." Sure, that may seem obvious, but keep in mind that this is the same company that went from Sonic Generations in 2011 to Sonic Lost World in 2013. 2 years. 2 years between those games. Look what happened. Story-wise, Sonic has been floundering for years, ever since the 06 backlash, and we've just been stuck with the same corny cartoon writing for years now.
Baldy nose hair! That's the best thing I've heard all day!
Of course, Sonic was never a super serious series, but it used to take itself at least a little bit more seriously back in the day, and give us stories with a bit of soul, rather than Sonic facing every threat with an MCU-esque quip up his sleeve. Frontiers finally found the tone Sonic fans had been asking for, and all we really wanted was just a bit of thought put into this stuff. The characters stand on their own, and actually experience emotions in a realistic manner, and Sonic is a little more mature, mainly in the sense that his demeanor does change depending on the situation. He's more tactile, which I get is a low bar, but when you look at what we've been stuck with, yeah. If I had to pinpoint exactly how the tone of Sonic has shifted, I'd say it's leaning more into its shonen roots. I mean, especially when you look at all of this. Oh, don't you just love that? It's not gone full teenage shonen. I'd say it's more in line tonally with Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is exactly where Sonic should be when you consider the mass age group appeal The Last Airbender has. But let's not make any rubbish live-action Netflix adaptations, okay? We can avoid that. So on the game side, Frontiers does seem to be the answer to our prayers, setting up a new gameplay foundation and beginning to heal the damage that years of mischaracterization has done to Sonic and his friends. Now, continuing this upwards trend, we're even getting a re-release of Sonic Generations with a new Shadow story included. It seems to be Sonic's equivalent to Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. Now, getting a whole new story dedicated to Shadow is a godsend if you ask me. Shadow hasn't been well written since Sonic Heroes, and that came out in 2003. Bloody hell, I came out in 2003. That's how long it's been. Shadow the Hedgehog, the game, basically backtracked on his character development over Sonic Adventure 2 and Heroes by regressing him back into being torn up over Maria's death, despite the fact that he had already made peace with it by the end of Adventure 2. The negative backlash to Shadow the Hedgehog, and of course, Sonic 06, has sort of put Shadow into purgatory ever since. He was stripped of any depth and turned into a caricature of himself. Flanderized, for lack of a better term. It felt like Sega just wanted to use him as a meme for how edgy he is, and it became stale rather quickly. They were just boiling his backstory and history down to just, ooh, look at how broody he is. But since Shadow Generations' narrative has been put together by the same story team as Frontiers, I think we're about to have Shadow's character rehabilitated by the time the credits roll. And thank God for it. Using a Generations re-release as an excuse to send Shadow on a whistle-stop tour of his life and show us how the Shadow of the present faces his demons of the past is an excellent way to not only set the continuity of his life in stone, but also to show us who he is with the added context of the more recent games he was a part of. The greatest benefit to this is that there's a whole new generation of kids that are into Sonic thanks to the Sonic movies. They've either only ever been exposed to Shadow's flanderized 2010s character, you guys remember Sonic Boom? Or maybe even just as a side character in a racing game, or the Mario and Sonic Olympic series, which they never should have cancelled, and that's why this Olympics, the Paris 24 ones, they suck. They're going on right now. They suck because there's no Mario and Sonic. Anyway, Shadow is in dire need of reintroduction, and it looks like that's actually happening, and all signs are pointing towards him taking his place as a proper pillar of the Sonic franchise, and it's about time, seeing as he's been so popular for so long.
He's only the second most popular character in the whole canon! Let me get you a chair, Mr. Shadow!
We're even getting a cool 3-episode anime. It seems to be getting a little darker to help flesh out Shadow's backstory and his relationship with Maria. It seems like Sega definitely sees that we want the series to embrace the shonen side of things. I'm kind of excited for this fight. Looks cool. We've got a third Sonic movie on the way, adapting the plot of Sonic Adventure 2, so, that is even more Shadow. Honestly, when you look at where we started with the Sonic movies, it's crazy that we're about to get our third one. The first 2 movies grossed $720 million between them, and it all started with this abomination.
Meow?
During our Sonic story drought, everyone looked to the comics for some proper Sonic adventures and character writing. Now we have confirmation that the IDW Comics run is canon to the game timeline, and we even have Ian Flynn, the man behind the comics, on the game's story team. It's really all coming together for us. Ian Flynn is kind of like the Dave Filoni of Sonic, because they both wear cowboy hats. I don't know why. What's with cowboy hats in these people? Except Dave Filoni sucks and should be fired along with the rest of Lucasfilm, but I'm getting off track here. Don't get me down that rabbit hole, because I will never come back. I'm sure by now I've made my point, that things are going well, but I really want to make sure this is hammered home, so I'll shine some spotlight on Sega's improved attitude towards feedback. Now, at some point, Sega realized that social media can allow them to directly engage with the people who buy their games. From people simply tweeting or Xing their opinions online, or YouTubers making detailed videos on their feelings about pretty much every nook and cranny of the Sonic series. There's no shortage of perspectives for Sega to take into account here. Unfortunately, they only seem to have picked up on this recently. But hey, better late than never. I mean, how can you miss Fidel? He's literally everywhere I go on Twitter. I do miss Kobanemanu456 though. Seriously, for a good few months after Frontiers released, if you even breathed an opinion on Frontiers, the actual director of the game, Morio Kishimoto, would be in your replies. He was always saying something like, "This is an interesting idea. We will take it into account going forward. Thank you for your feedback." I'd say one of the most consistent complaints about Frontiers was how the platform challenges in the open zone areas did not blend in at all with the environment, and players just couldn't get past how they were floating there and sticking out like a sore thumb. My thumb isn't sore. I don't know why I showed you it. The biggest tweet regarding this referenced how platforming in the open zone should be handled like that classic Sonic CD opening from all the AMVs back in the day. Where the pathways were carved into the cliffs themselves and actually blended into the terrain. Pretty much everyone who played the game was thinking this, and there he was, Morio Kishimoto, in the replies, letting us know he is going to take this feedback into account for the future. And God bless him for it. Honestly, having my biggest complaint about Sonic Frontiers publicly addressed on Twitter by the director of the game was pretty gratifying, and was a really refreshing and reassuring feeling after feeling negative about Sonic for so many consecutive years. Sega's new direct approach is far better than where they used to get their feedback from. Game journalists. Game journalists suck. We all know this, and for too long Sega turned to their reviews for suggestions on what to do with Sonic, which was, an ill-advised plan, considering none of the reviewers even like or know anything about Sonic.
Okay. I think we're at the
Real
point
talk.
where we need to admit that this was never really a great franchise.
Nope.
And that we keep trying to find this thing that was never really actually there.
Sonic was never good.
They never had any idea what Sonic fans wanted, and are, objectively, the worst way to relay information about what fans want to any game company, considering the fact that all game journalism outlets made direct enemies of the fans years ago and sacrificed all of their credibility. I'd much rather Sega listen to the community directly, and it's nice to have community figures like Fidel and other YouTubers to directly channel those voices, rather than the brainlets at IGN or Kotaku. Even as I was making this video, we got another win caused by fans being vocal. Enough of us commented how we, like to have access to the Japanese box art of Sonic X Shadow Generations. And hey, they made it happen thanks to the social media team letting them know that people wanted this. And an update again, we got another win provided by the social media team. Because of the re-release of Generations, everyone was worried that the Steam and Xbox versions would be delisted, specifically the Steam version, because there's 13 years worth of mods built up on that thing, an amazing testament to the passion of the community in the mods for Sonic Generations. It truly enhances the product and makes it so much better. And of course, we were worried that the original Generations would get delisted, and that might affect the mods. The mods might go with it, and future people would not have access to the mods that many people have worked so hard on. But hey, the official Sonic Twitter account put out a tweet letting us know, yes, the original version of the game will be delisted, but it will still be available in a legacy bundle that they're putting together. So you will be able to purchase it as part of a bundle, which is better than nothing. And the main thing that they confirmed to us directly is that mods will not be affected. And this was done as a direct response to the feedback they had received from us worrying about what would happen to the mods if Generations was delisted. And they're going to be fine. Good news! Just imagine something like this happening in 2015. It just would never happen back then. Wow! Silas, that's a lot of good news for Sonic fans. I'm sure you're happy. You must be feeling confident about the future going forward. Ha ha ha. I'm gonna keep it real with you guys. I'm still not convinced. I'm a tough man to satisfy. What can I say? Now this attitude comes from recent lessons I've learned, where certain announcements were made about a thing that I like. A thing that hadn't been good for quite a while. And these announcements convinced me that it was going to be good again, only for it to turn out to be worse than it had ever been before. And all of my excitement, turned into a profound period of classic British depression. A lot of my Doctor Who related bitterness is going to seep into these scripts for quite a while, by the way. So get used to that if you plan on sticking around. But let's get on with things here. Back to the supposed upward trend that I mentioned earlier. It began with the movies, and sure, those were financial hits and good publicity for the brand. But let's not forget how things started here. Remember this design? It was just pure insult to injury, considering the wasteland that was the Sonic franchise at the time. Regardless of the fact that the movie design was fixed, and fixed quite well to be honest, it's clear the Sonic movie wasn't made by a team of fans. It was a harmless buddy cop movie that just featured Sonic. Yes, Jim Carrey was good, and yes, James Marsden radiates intense DILF energy. But there was no love for Sonic in this project. I mean, dude, just look at it. Just look at it. No fan would have ever allowed this design to get out. A design that would have had to go through many stages, many stages of approval, by the way. Now along comes a second movie, an even bigger financial success and relatively well received by fans. Now lessons were learned here, and there's a bit more in the ways of iconography and reverence for the Sonic series. Knuckles and Tails were designed well the first time round, but no one is going to make that mistake again. And the Death Egg robot looked brilliant, actually. It really did. And of course we had some interesting echidna lore and Super Sonic, which is cool. I like him. He's cool. But I gotta say, all of this is pretty surface level and still feels like they're just using Sonic to push an otherwise unremarkable family movie. Except, this time they did a little bit more Google searching about the Sonic series. At its core, Sonic 2 suffers from having the DNA of the first movie, where Sonic ends up with a human family, he has a bedroom in their house, and stays put in Green Hill, which really doesn't suit the free spirit of Sonic the Hedgehog at all. Speaking of his human family, there's an irritating focus on humans through subplots that just have no right being in a Sonic movie. Again, it just feels like Paramount is using Sonic to push a generic family flick. Not to get too much into it, although I will get too much into it, modern movie production is flooded with DEI requirements, meaning on-screen diversity has to be forced unnaturally into every project, and it's pretty hard to pull that off in a movie that should be about Sonic characters. This results in completely intrusive and movie-derailing subplots, such as that whole wedding storyline being used as an excuse to shove as many humans in as possible just to meet some stupid diversity quota. The whole sequence of Maddie and Rachel fighting gun agents reeks of studio-mandated empowering moments. If anyone is fighting gun agents, I want it to be Sonic, not two random women who have nothing to do with the games. The funny thing is, if DEI really has to be pushed here, gun agents are the best way to do it. There's so many of them here. You can just meet all your quotas through the agents, and they did make them diverse. But maybe they're just not allowed to have too many diverse people as bad guys. I can't believe I'm talking about woke Hollywood in relation to Sonic, but that's the world we live in today. I'm sorry if I upset you here. I'm not, actually. This is a Paramount-made movie, remember that. The same company that's still allowing Alex Kurtzman to control Star Trek, despite the fact that he made Star Trek Discovery. Did you see the Sector 31 trailer, by the way? So, Sonic Movie 2 is more respectful, but the whole thing stinks of, modern Hollywood. This is best exemplified by the fact that the music is mostly generic nonsense, made by Junkie XL that pays no homages to the soundtracks of the games, which is a massive part of Sonic's identity. And let's be honest, the soundtrack is the only thing that allowed the series to survive the 2010s. Junkie XL used Ant-Man and the Wasp music for the Sonic vs. Knuckles fight. And for some reason, after he did that, they still signed him on for Sonic Movie 3. Oh, and did I mention he's talked about using AI to make music?
Well, I can be very short. I love AI, I embrace it. I can't wait until there becomes like a functioning software program where AI is really like integrated in the music making process.
Lovely. That really speaks to his quality as an artist, doesn't it? Something like the Mario movie was admittedly very light on narrative, but in every aspect and tiny detail of the movie, you could feel the reverence towards the Mario IP, especially in the OST, which is just composed by Koji Kondo himself. So it bypasses the risk of turning into generic Hollywood gobbledygook entirely by just bringing the actual guy in. We can hope that the Mario movie may have positively impacted the development of the third Sonic movie, since it grossed $1.36 billion worldwide and was the most profitable movie of 2023. So, you see where respecting the IP can get you? Listen, I am very interested in the idea of a movie adaptation of Sonic Adventure 2, but since this will have the same DNA of the first movie that plagued its sequel, and seemingly the same creative team as those two movies, I'm remaining cautious here. What I'm getting at is that Sega is allowing this to happen. I understand that the movies are good publicity and they make good money, but this isn't really Sonic, and I wish Sega cared more about that fact. I don't want them to be complacent just because of those healthy box office numbers, and perhaps that attitude might just end up spilling over into the games. Because let's be real, Sega's track record with successful Sonic is just, bad. I consider Sonic's first objective win to be Sonic Frontiers, so that's a little under 2 years ago, at the time of making this video anyway. The first two movies don't count to me as the return to form everyone's talking about. I see them more as Sonic breaking back into the zeitgeist of the new generation, regardless of what image is being projected by those movies. Yes, Frontiers is a fun game, it's definitely a great foundation to work off, and the way Sega has engaged with the feedback to the game has been encouraging, but again, this is the same company that went from Sonic Generations to this. The same game company that let Sonic Boom happen, showing that they hadn't learned a thing from the disastrous Sonic 06. They didn't learn from that. Again, it's not even been 2 years since Frontiers. Anything could happen as far as I'm concerned. We did get Sonic Superstars, which was overwhelmingly mediocre. When I think of the word milquetoast, I think of Sonic Superstars. Sega actually had the gall to charge 50 great British pounds for this thing. Sonic Mania is a far better 2D Sonic game. It looks better and has superior level design, and it released at the price of £15 of the king's money. Americans, you can do the transfer rate. I'm not going to do it for you. I'm pretty sure Superstars wasn't done in the pixel art style purely because Sega wanted to find an excuse to overcharge for it. They were sort of like, look guys, it's 3D. That makes it more expensive. And they wonder why the game didn't meet their sales expectations, huh? So Sega's greed hasn't been cured, and it probably never will be. Being owned by a pseudo-gambling corporation isn't doing it any favors. This is the same greed that led to so many Sonic games being rushed to the finish line, leading them to being critically lambasted, and rightfully so, and ultimately pushing Sonic deeper and deeper into the deep, dark abyss of irrelevancy. Sonic Frontiers sold great, but how will Sega react to that money? We knew that Sega plans to make Sonic a yearly franchise, which could be a little worrying. Now, I assume this yearly schedule includes spin-offs developed by other teams, So I think we're in the clear when it comes to this issue. But even if Sonic Team is using Frontiers as the template going forward, how do we know Sega isn't going to rush them to finish it just because of how well Frontiers sold? Do the higher-ups just have it in them to wait on the payday? Looking at their track record, it seems like they don't. If you remember the interviews, Sonic Frontiers itself barely got itself over the finish line in time, and Takeshi Iizuka had to fight hard for the 1-year delay. Can you imagine the state of Frontiers if it didn't get that extra year? I love this game, but in the final quarter of it, you can so plainly see that the dev team were desperately trying to wrap this project up in time for release. That's from the higher-ups of just a couple of years ago. The ones who almost let the game come out a year too early, which would have left us with yet another disaster. That wasn't 2010 Sega, that's Sega quite recently, Sega 2 years ago. For all we know, the next Frontier-style game could be pumped out far too soon in hopes of another Frontier-sized payday landing Sonic fans with another stinker, and we end up right back where we were in the 2010s. So no, I don't trust Sonic yet. Maybe when the next open zone game drops and it's as good as or better than Frontiers, I might be on board. But even then, I imagine I'll be a little hesitant to drop the "we're so back." I'll need to see this trajectory maintained through to the end of this decade, and then I'll feel okay giving this series my full confidence. I get that you may see this as a little extreme, but being a Sonic fan throughout the 2010s was a rough time that I can't easily forget. It'll take a lot to counteract that. I suppose a lot of this cynicism comes from the fact that I've had literally everything I love burned to ashes. Star Wars is dead, Star Trek has destroyed even its cult following, let alone any hope of mainstream appeal, and Doctor Who just produced the worst season of television I've ever seen in my life. I've been burned by a lot of things, and I'm not looking to get hurt again as a Sonic fan. You can label me a hater for not being too positive, but I'm British and no one does misery like we do. We're world class at it. I do want to cap this off on a nicer note, however. I love Sonic. I love it enough to make this video voicing all my concerns about the future of the franchise. All of this comes from a place of passion for this anthropomorphic blue fucking hedgehog. Hell, I flew all the way to Paris to see the Sonic Symphony, and it was one of the best nights of my life. And I'm going to see the show again in London, twice. I'm very excited for Sonic X Shadow Generations. It really seems like we're getting Shadow the Hedgehog done properly for the first time in years. And I love that. I voice these concerns simply because I want Sonic to be the best that it can be. Because Sonic is really, really cool. Yes, being a Sonic fan has been good fun since 2022, with Frontiers and its expansion and popping off in Paris when Tomoya Otani took the stage, but can I say that Sonic is back? Maybe I can, but I can't say that he's here to stay. Maybe one day I will.